Memory cells, memory B cells and memory T cells, are very important for helping you respond more quickly if you ever see a pathogen that you've already responded to. If we consider the very first time you ever see a new pathogen, it takes time to ramp up a response. We can look at the level of antibodies in the blood as an indicator of how strong a response is. And it takes about 5 days after initially being exposed to a pathogen before you have any measurable level of antibodies in your blood. And it can take up to 15 days before you reach the maximum response. Now, while your T cells and B cells are becoming activated and forming an army and trying to fight off the pathogen is making you sick. The first time you're exposed to a new pathogen, it's probably going to make you sick. Ideally, you don't die so that your B and T cells fight off that pathogen and get rid of it. In the process, they also leave behind memory cells that recognize that particular pathogen. Now, if you ever see that same pathogen again, the memory cells are already activated. They can ramp up a very strong, very fast response so that within a matter of hours there are measurable antibodies in the blood, and within a couple of days you have a very strong response so that you can fight off that pathogen before you even know you're sick, before you even realize the pathogen was in your body. This is the mechanism by which vaccines protect us from diseases. When someone is vaccinated, their body is exposed to a pathogen in order to build up an immune response of memory cells so that if the person is ever exposed to that pathogen again, their memory cells can mount a really fast response and kill the pathogen before the person even gets sick. We have vaccines for lots of different diseases so that we can get the vaccine against the disease and mount an immune response without getting sick, so that if we ever encounter the disease, we won't get sick with it. Things like polio or tetanus, diphtheria, measles, mumps, rubella, influenza, HPV, lots and lots of diseases can be vaccinated against. One of the things to consider when we're talking about vaccines is, why doesn't the vaccination make you sick? Why doesn't that make you sick if it's the first time you've ever seen it? Shouldn't you get sick while you're trying to build up the response? The trick is that the vaccine is not a whole healthy pathogen that can make you sick. In some cases, the pathogen in a vaccine is dead. It's been killed. With killed vaccines, there's no chance of getting sick with the disease because you gave them pathogen that was already dead. Downside is that it's a little harder to get a good immune response to a dead pathogen. So it may take a number of doses of the dead pathogen before you can build up a strong enough response to be able to protect yourself against the disease if you ever encounter it. A lot of vaccines are what we call attenuated vaccines. That means it's a weakened or a damaged form of the pathogen, but it is still alive. This tends to produce a much better immune response than a dead vaccine. But it has the downside that it is live pathogen with the potential that you could get sick from that. Now, healthy people don't get sick from attenuated vaccines, but people with weakened immune systems could get sick. One of the newer types of vaccines is what's called a recombinant vaccine. In a recombinant vaccine, you don't use the whole pathogen. You only use a part of the pathogen, and you put that part of the pathogen in a live organism that's not dangerous. So, a normal flora bacteria that's showing off this pathogen antigen. Your body is not going to get sick from the safe bacterium, but it's showing the dangerous antigen, so you will mount an immune response against that. So you have sort of the combination of the live having a better immune response, but the safety of not having the live pathogen in your body. A fourth type of vaccine is what's called a toxoid vaccine. In some cases, we're not trying to fight the pathogen itself. We may be trying to fight a toxin released by the pathogen. In a toxoid vaccine, you create memory cells that fight the toxin, as opposed to memory cells that fight the actual bacteria itself. Another thing that's interesting about vaccines is that they often require more than one exposure. You don't just get one shot of the chickenpox vaccine and then you're good. It actually takes two. The number of exposures that you need for maximum protection and the spacing of those is determined over time looking at what series provides protection. So it used to be they thought one chickenpox shot would be enough. And then they discovered that as vaccinated children were reaching their teen years, they were coming down with chickenpox. That told them that one chickenpox vaccination is not adequate. You need a booster shot a little bit later. So now they do two. You do one early on and one a little bit later, and the combination of two exposures builds enough memory cells that we think that provides lifetime protection from chickenpox. In other cases, you need to have booster shots because the memory cells could die off over time. For example, you need a new tetanus shot about every 10 years. The memory cells that respond to the tetanus toxin decrease over time, so after about 10 years you may not be protected any longer. Another dose of the vaccine and up come your memory cells and you're protected against tetanus again. In other cases, you need more than one vaccine because the pathogen changes. That's what we see with the flu vaccine. Influenza is an amazing virus with hundreds and thousands of different versions, different strains. And you can't vaccinate against all of the different versions of flu. So the flu shot that we get each year is specially formulated to protect against the strains of flu that are going to be most prevalent in that year. So this year's flu shot protects against the strains of flu that are going to be most common, they think, this year. Next year's flu shot will have to be against different strains of flu. That's why your flu shot from this year isn't good next year. You need a new one.